it's exactly 8:30. We should expect the virtual audience to look forward to joining us right away. So please, as much as possible, let's reduce all the distractions in the hall. Good morning, everybody, and we welcome you to First Bank's Nigeria Economic Outlook 2023. This event is an event that the bank organizes for its customers and potential customers to understand the dynamics in the economic environment as they plan for business growth and acceleration in the new year. We've been able to assemble experts, keynote speaker, as well as panelists to provide the required economic insight that will provide the input into various businesses' plans in 2023. So at this point, I welcome our virtual audience as well as our in-person audience. You're welcome, and we thank you for connecting for the virtual audience, and for the in-person audience, we thank you for attending this event. I promise you, you're going to come off here with very deep insights from experts who understand what it means to operate in an environment like Nigeria, because they also come with both domestic and global experience in economic areas, in business matters, and as well as in banking, because this is being organized by a bank. So, formally welcome you. I will call on Ini Ebong, who is representing the CEO of First Bank Group, to just come do a formal welcome and opening remarks before I bring in some of the experts that you've been looking forward to listen to. Thank you. Ini Ebong, you have the floor. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My task is actually quite simple, just to welcome you all to this event. On behalf of the Managing Director, CEO of First Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Shola Adedunton, and the board, we'd like to formally welcome you to this event, which seeks to examine the macroeconomic outlook for 2023. As we all know, 2023 for Nigeria is in many ways a watershed year. We have elections, we have a series of other events, the census, we have a challenging macroeconomic environment, so many things that will all affect us. We're also coming off the back of a recession, induced by COVID, the Russia-Ukrainian war, and all these have a significant impact on the business environment and the macroeconomic frame for Nigeria. We only just have to look across the border, one or two more borders, to and see what are dear neighbors are going through in Ghana. And it just tells you the amount of disruption and potential change that could happen. So we hope we'll have a very enriching session today. We have very erudite speakers here. Dr. Adedipe is over here as well. And we will share our thoughts and views and have hopefully a pretty interactive session around how we shape the future of 2023, the business environment, and more importantly, how First Bank can stand ready with you to support you as we navigate this trying and tumultuous period. So thank you very much for attending. You're most welcome, and we hope we have a wonderful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ini, for that exciting remarks. We are getting back to business right away, and it's my pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, an expert in economic matters, an expert in business strategy. He is no other person like Dr. Abiodun Adedipe. Abiodun Adedipe is an experienced professional. He has over 42 years post-graduation experience, and that cuts across the teaching environment, that's the educational sector, investment banking, project finance, management and financial consulting, as well as leadership in business. So you expect he will provide the thoughts around businesses, around how you operate in a dynamic environment like Nigeria. Abiodun's career has spanned across several areas, several companies, both in the consulting world, including staff of World Bank, African region. He's worked in some banks, IMB of those, First City Monument Bank. He holds a doctorate degree in industrial economics, specializing in corporate finance. So he also gives some talks around how businesses can organize their finances to make more money and to grow their market share. Like I said, he is a PhD holder in industrial economics from University of Lagos and a BSc first class holder in economics from University of Ife, now OAU. He's a Sir Adam Thompson Scholarship awardee, and he was also a visiting doctoral student lecturer at University of Sussex. He's a member of several respected organizations, including Institute of Directors of Nigeria, Nigeria Chartered Institute of Bankers, as well as Nigeria Economic Society and American Economic Society. Dr. Abiodun is a veteran board member. He sits on the board of several organizations, both as chairman, as member, and as a committee chairman in those organizations. So join me in welcoming Dr. Abiodun Adedipe, our keynote speaker for today. Thank you and enjoy his session.
The executive management of First Bank, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. And I want to start by expressing my appreciation to the bank and its management for having me do this keynote speech this morning. I put together a deck of 38 slides, but I will speak to only 16 of them, which will give us the picture we want to paint and also a direction in terms of what to look at and how to respond to those issues. So, direction, should I point this? Is it towards you? Oh, okay, sorry, it's still off. Let me switch it on. Okay, it's on now. Okay, thank you. So, what I will do is to put this in 4 planks. First is to set the premise, and then after that, we look at some key issues about the Nigerian macroeconomic environment, and of course, come back home to what the challenges are, and then what should businesses be doing at this very time. And there's a joke around that in the olden days, we say you go to a consultant, and all he tells you is to borrow your wristwatch to tell you what the time is. No value added. But what we say nowadays is that when you go to a consultant And First Bank indeed to you is a consultant. Let me put it that way. When you come to them, they look at the time and they tell you that this is what you should be doing at this time of the day. And that is the value we are here to, extract for this conversation. I like putting this first before people each time we talk about the Nigerian business environment. And that's the fact that it has many challenges. And that is what we talk about most of the time. But at the same time also, there are opportunities. So in which case, what we see when we look at that environment and what we focus on is a matter of choice, which means you can choose to focus on the challenges and you cannot equally choose otherwise and focus on the opportunities. But there's also something there that is very important. Now, we all make choices, and then in the end, our choices make us. Which means it is what we choose to accept and to act on and the way we act. And that is what determines what we get at the end of the day. So now, 5 major disruptions globally that we are contending with in 2023. The first of them is the Ukraine war. It started in the media as Russian invasion of Ukraine. And then the media retagged it as Russian-Ukrainian war. And then later they retagged it as Russian war on Ukraine. But now what you read is Ukrainian war, which of course comes in context of my own interpretation of it when it happened. And I said simply, physical wars, when they happen, there's always a location to it. So the question is, where is this war taking place? And the response was, in Ukraine. I said, okay, when there is physical war, usually infrastructure assets get destroyed. So where are these things being destroyed? Again, the answer came back, Ukraine. Equally, physical war often results in life losses. Where are lives being lost? Again, Ukraine. Then came the business interpretation. And I asked the question, who is the primary beneficiary of this war? And then we talked around it, and I said, well, it is simple, the defense industry. Because every time you go into physical war, weapons, ammunition are taken from the arsenal, you prosecute the war, new contracts have to be issued to replace those weapons and ammunition. So defense industry, primary beneficiary. Fifth question, how will this affect all of us around the world? Then we now realize that Ukraine is central to supply of grains to the global market, 24.1%. And then we saw there Russia also, very key to mainland Europe, and of course the rest of us in terms of the place of plus in OPEC plus. That is Russia in terms of hydrocarbons. So now that is an issue. As he said in his opening remark a couple of minutes ago, the pandemic has come back again and has become a major challenge. But again, we know that in 2020, the pandemic caused the global economy to contract by 3.3%. Our economy in Nigeria contracted by 1.92%. But we also know that in response to that, major policy, shifts in terms of fiscal stimulus by many governments around the world, and at the same time also accommodative monetary policy. Now, the combination of these two helped the global economy to recover strongly in 2021. Then we raised this conversation by this time last year, and we said, if economies, recover strongly, and these stimulus and accommodative monetary policy have triggered inflationary pressures, is there not a possibility that by the time we get into 2023, we begin to see stagflation? In which case, the growth triggered by this, stimulus will slow to the normal historical pace, but inflation is still high up there, and then we begin to worry about stagflation. And so the issue now is a lot of changes have happened as a result of that. And we now said macroeconomy instability, and that again is global. Interest rates up, exchange rate, currency crisis in many countries. In fact, in 2022, several countries experienced currency crisis because the dollar strengthened at some point. In fact, about many countries had 20% diminution in the value of their currency as a result of what happened in 2022. Then, of course, a lot of other issues, unemployment rate and the rest of it. Now, we come to societal divisiveness, which, of course, is a major issue all around the world. Just take it from this perspective. take the American society just to illustrate. Economically today we're talking about the limit, the debt limit of the American government at $31.7 trillion. And now, if that limit is not increased, then by June, the government business in U.S. will be shut down. And the challenge there is that politically, there's so much divisiveness that the Congress is likely not to give an approval to that increase. So it's a concern now. Besides, also, the U.S. being the largest economy in the world, well, if you are not using PPP anyway, but if you use PPP, that's purchasing power parity, China's economy obviously will be the largest in the world. But take it from the common balance that U.S. has the largest economy in the world. That means U.S. going into a recession will have implications for the rest of us. And there is that expectation that in 2023, the U.S. might tumble into recession. But some of us looking at the recent data suspect that it may likely escape it, just like Britain escaped recession in between October and November 2022, growing 0.1% their GDP and thereby escaping recession. There's also geopolitical tensions all around the world. We see what is going on in Ukraine. In fact, the interpretation really is that it's a proxy war. Proxy war because Ukraine is the one carrying the banner, but behind the banner, the punches are coming from somewhere else. Okay? There's also the issue between China and Taiwan. That's also an issue. North Korea is also strengthening and threatening South Korea. So, different challenges in terms of geopolitical tensions. Now, I summarized the global socio-economic challenges in this slide. And what it talks to is what I had said earlier on, the Russian-Ukrainian war, as we commonly call it, rising cost of doing business, that is how it affects you. Now, we thought when the war started, just like the same way we misinterpreted COVID-19. You know, initially most leaders were like, oh, it's a Chinese disease, and that's where it will be. Forgetting that the world we live in now, there is massive migration, cross-border interactions, and travels. And before we knew it, what we call social intensive activities became a massive risk in terms of health to start with, then later economic risk, and then we talked about humanitarian risk, and the fourth one was security risk. 4 crises the world faced as a result of the pandemic. Now, we saw responses that caused now eventually rising cost of doing business, shifting economic growth to energy, exporting countries, increased global energy prices, of course, slowing Chinese economy for 2 reasons, which they also have addressed towards the end of 2022. Zero COVID, from which they learned that, look, if we continue with zero COVID, by all means, our economy could go all the way down. And then the other one was the major sector in the Chinese economy, which is real estate. And the issue is we needed to also intervene. So the Chinese government did 2 things. One was to revert the zero COVID policy, and the second was to call the banks to now intervene in the real estate sector. So that way, the second largest economy in the world also has received a fresh impetus. So at least that gives us some measure of, comfort in terms of what to expect this year. Now, sovereign debt conundrum. The whole idea simply is that we spend so much time analyzing and agonizing, over sovereign debt in Nigeria. And I often tell myself, number one, sovereign debt is a major challenge all over the world. It's not peculiar to Nigeria. And oftentimes I always pick the case of UK. On the 10th of June, year 2020, UK reverted a position that existed in 1963. And that is where sovereign debt became greater than GDP. As of September 2021, GDP of UK was 103.7% of their GDP, that's sovereign debt. Now, same thing goes all around the world. But the big question is this: what are we doing with the borrowed funds? And that is the real challenge when it comes to economic discourse. But for us, the issue is, I've talked about some of these things, workplace dynamics. The major challenge in Nigeria we say now is, quote and unquote, the Japa syndrome. Okay? But one of the things we've also discovered is that at the very extreme, maybe only 3% of Nigerians in that category will actually find opportunity to live. So the question is the remaining 97%. What are we doing in terms of looking at our business responses? If, for the sake of discussion, we say okay, First Bank is experiencing, let's say exits as a result of this Japa syndrome thing. How should First Bank respond? This applies to every business in Nigeria. How should we respond? It then means we should be looking, for example, at creating a pipeline of those that will replace those that are exiting. So if you create a pipeline, that gives you an internal strategy for dealing with that challenge individually. But of course, again, we look at African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which when we began, we thought, this will create a major challenge for Nigeria because everybody is looking at Nigeria as a market to sell their products to. So any global manufacturer can then look at situating his or her factory in Ghana, in Ethiopia, in Rwanda, and anywhere else in Africa, targeting Nigeria as the market. But today, that story is different. And the whole idea simply is that I will pick just one sector, automobiles. Okay, there are automobiles being produced in Nigeria and exported to other African countries. Okay, so that means the potential is there for us to export. In many countries are worsening rapidly. Shock waves continue to emanate from the Russian Federation's invasion of Ukraine, especially in energy and other commodity. That means twice in the last, 7 years. And what triggered those two are different. 2016 triggered by crisis in the oil sector. But it especially affected Nigeria adversely because of a situation we were, which we are now in as well, just to put that in context. In 2014, there was this interview granted to Christian Amanpour of CNN by our then petroleum minister, that's Diziani, Alice Madueke. And she said in that interview, I listened to it directly, not that it was reported to me, that oil theft in Nigeria was ranging between 400,000 and 600,000 barrels per day. At that time, that was 2014. So if I look at what we are also experiencing now, it's like we recover from that and then we reverted to it. And that is why we cannot take advantage of the rise in the price of hydrocarbons when Russia invaded Ukraine February last year. Now, something I want to point out also, that many times we lose sight of. Our population has been growing, maybe in the last 20 years to last 10 years at 3.2% per annum, but that growth rate has been slowing. In fact, the latest UN data indicated 2.55%, and we are going towards 2.5 per annum. Now, if you take what the growth rate is, and I laid it out again from 2013 January till date, and you look at that vis-a-vis our GDP, in the last 6 quarters of the growth of our economy against our population growth rate, our economy grew faster than our population. After we lost it in 2015, we regained that in 2021. But the last official data for GDP, that is third quarter of 2022, again, our economy grew slower than the growth of our population. But what I want to bring out is this, and that is the implication for business. As of July last year, 2022, our population became 216.7 million estimated. That put us as number 6 in the world. That means the 6th most populated country in the world. Okay? Median age, 18.1 years. I want you to put that on one side. The most populated country in the world, as of today, China, median age, 38 years. It's an aging population. India is number 2. But projected that by June this year, India will become the most populated country in the world. But what's the median age? 28 years. So generally in interpretation, we say India already has an advantage over China. Because its population is growing, but it is youthful relative to that of China. Then bring it back home to Nigeria. So you are looking at 38, 28, 18. And of course, not only that in the dynamics of our population in Nigeria, more of our population now live in the urban areas. Okay? Now we've shifted from about 47%, so 5-6 years ago, to 51, almost 52% of our population in urban areas. Question is, what does that imply for your business? What does that mean? I will talk to that when I conclude shortly. Now, I normally use this slide to show people that our economy is diversified. Where the problem is the external sector. Our foreign earnings are not diversified. That's where the problem is. And interestingly, the government of Nigeria officially now accepted this position. You know, when the finance minister 2 weeks ago presented, it was last week, that presented the breakdown of this year's federal government budget. And I said, I've been telling this story to them for over 10 years. Now, when you look at this, it tells you the structure of the economy. What this means for you as a business person is that economic activities are taking place in all the 43 sectors of our economy, which the MBS now aggregated into 19 that you see on this chart. Okay? It means value is being created across the entire spectrum. It also means there are opportunities for business in all of this. Also, officially, the government has accepted what I had seen over this year that I've been talking to, and that is there are 6 major sectors that contribute the most to our GDP. In fact, they've accounted on the average for between 77% and 82% of our GDP, and that is agriculture, mining and quarrying, manufacturing, trade, ICT, and real estate. Okay, between those 6, which means a lot of value is being created there. So now, depending on whom we are putting this to, the interpretation will go in different directions. If you are a business person, the question to ask is, how many of my customers operate in those sectors? Then if you are government, then I will go to you in terms of your tax revenue. And that is what we normally use this to do. But the key thing here is to understand that there are opportunities across the entire spectrum. So I will skip this slide because that's I will call it in its 40. That's talking about the external reserves, exchange value of the naira, and all those issues. I will skip them because they can still come later. Inflation, I've spoken about that, but just to mention that inflation in Nigeria, the major factor is food inflation. And we said this repeatedly over the years. In fact, I did some work for Central Bank 2 years ago on food security in Nigeria. And what became obvious there is that in order for us to get to food security in Nigeria, there are 2 things fundamentally we must pay attention to. And that is availability of food and then affordability of food. Those are 4 out of the 4 metrics in measuring food security, globally. Now, this particular slide summarizes the challenges and risks in the Nigerian business environment. Now, these are the things we all talk about all the time. So I have it summarized so that you won't say I'm painting a very rosy picture. Because some people at times tell me that, oh, you painted a rosy picture of Nigerian business environment. Say, no, the challenges are here. We recognize them all. But the question is, what should we be doing at this time? And that is the outlook. The World Bank, in the Global Economic Prospect issued last week, said this about Nigeria. And it's important to, give attention to it. And they said, our latest forecast indicates a sharp, long-lasting slowdown with global growth declining to 1.7%, okay, this year. That is what they see globally. And, of course, they mentioned 3 major challenges there. And those are inflation, which I've mentioned already, currency depreciation, Nigeria is in that, and, of course, underinvestment in people and the private sector. So the World Bank now came to Nigeria and said there are 5 factors that underpin their own outlook for Nigeria this year. Number 1, rising production costs. We can all relate with that because we are in it. Secondly, underperforming oil and gas sector. That, of course, is also obvious. Then, thirdly, insecurity. We can all relate with that as well. Then the floods that happened in 2022. And, of course, underscored by policy uncertainty. Those are the things the World Bank said. And so their forecast now brought out 4 important points. 1 is oil and gas growth will be restrained. 2, growth in agriculture will soften on the back of the floods of last year and what is happening with insecurity. Thirdly, persistent fear and FX shortages. The World Bank also mentioned. And lastly, they talked about weak fiscal position. Now, in our own interpretation of this in BA Consult, we now said there are a few things we need to add to that list before coming up with an outlook. So you will have this. Everybody will get a copy of this. Because this now is the property of First Bank, and I'm sure First Bank will give it to you as their very, well-appreciated customer. Okay? Now, one of the things we said is there's also tax for road swaps being done by Dangote, NNPC, MTN, etc. And we said that if we talk about revenue expenditure nexus, revenue also, maturing obligations nexus, we often ignore the fact that if I don't pay tax directly to the federation account, but use it to deliver roads, that tax also should be taken as part of the revenue government generated in that period. So if we do that, then the ratios we generate from revenue expenditure relationship and revenue obligations will not be as dismal as they generally appear. But added to that also, we expect this year that domestic production capacity will expand. Refined petroleum products, Dangote Refinery will come on stream this year. 650,000 barrels per day, the largest single train refinery in the world. Single train, mark the reference there. And there are also 2 other modular refineries we expect to come on stream this year. So that will, of course, impact the supply of refined petroleum products. Secondly, rice is a major staple in Nigeria. Nigeria is a major producer of paddy rice in Africa. But not only that, we are also getting into the threshold of commissioning the largest rice mill, in Lagos State, and largest, if not in Africa, at least sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, that will also impact the supply of rice processed into the market. Thirdly, consumables. That is talking about food products and domestic items. Then the fourth one is automobiles. I've mentioned that earlier. Now, what do all of this mean? I also decided to bring this into my conversation because I always look out for Purchasing Managers Index. I used to rely on the one done by Central Bank. But at some point, Central Bank stopped doing that. So from 2022, they never published it again. So I then looked around, okay, which one has been consistent? I can really pick up. So I picked on this one done by Stanbic IBTC. But what it means is simply this. Every month, they survey 400 companies operating within the business environment in Nigeria across 5 sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, services, construction, and retail. But what I'm bringing out here is this. The Purchasing Managers Index is actually a measure of business confidence. Anytime it is above 50, okay, what it means is that businesses have confidence that the economy will expand. And so the purchasing managers will place orders for supplies of inputs. Now, alternatively, when it is below 50, it means they are losing confidence. All right? So what is important here is not so much as where the one I'm using came from. What is important is the interpretation. Okay? Because I'm sure, I guess FBN Quest does the same. So that's why I have to make this, reference. The important thing is the interpretation. And that's what matters to us. So what this points to is the fact that the economy has prospect of business opportunities for players within this economy. So let me go to the final slide here. What do we expect? That's from our own perspective. What do we expect this year? Now, we expect the Nigerian GDP to grow by between 3.27% and 3.32%. And this is the basis for it. All those things I said, because somebody asked me yesterday, if the World Bank says they've cut down our GDP growth expectation to 2.7%, why are you at 3.32? I said, very simple. Between January and September 2022, the Nigerian economy grew by 2.97% average. And if you look historically, that is basing on data from 1960 till date. I'm not talking of data in the last 10 years. From 1960 till date, you will discover that historically, our economy grew strongly in the last quarter of the year. That has been the historical pattern. So if that was the case, that would mean last quarter of 2022, our economy must have grown maybe slightly above 3%. So if we take that along with 2.97% for the first 3 quarters of the year, we probably would have ended 2022 at a little above 3.1%. So if that happened, then in the light of 2 things. One, first half of this year, we have elections, and then we have a change of government, May 29th. So a new government comes in May 29th, and then they have the second half year to deal with. Now, when you interact with the manifestos of the three leading presidential contenders, what we find there is, number one, they all have business-friendly manifestos. So to that extent, we also project that there's a likelihood that any of them get into the office, because we are not here to talk about politics, okay? It's about the economics of what is happening. Any of them gets to the office, we believe strongly that they are likely to put together the cabinet before September. And then, of course, also start running. So if that happens, then we see a second half year in 2023 that will be better than the first half year. So that is where the expectation is coming from. Secondly, inflation rate, we expect will moderate this year, but still remain double digit. Maybe end at 7.76%, I mean 17.76%. Of course, by the time we put this together, we had not seen the data for December, which is out now. It's dampened a little, slightly, the data for December. Thirdly, monetary policy normalization could start as early as the second quarter of this year. That is, MPR now at 16.5%, we expect might likely, go downwards. More importantly, by the second half of this year. Then, of course, bank lending rate will remain double digit. I mean, we can't escape that because we are in an inflationary environment. So to that extent, inflation is a big number in the, cost of doing business for banks. Accelerated manufacturing and focused export promotion will bring some stability to the Naira exchange rate. Of course, official likely to be at about 480 Naira to the dollar. The Nigeria Economic Summit Group says it will likely go to 500 Naira to the dollar. Okay? So we all have our reasons for choosing where to be. And of course, roadside rate may probably improve to 705 Naira to the dollar. Improvement in infrastructure will begin to positively impact the cost of doing business. And of course, finally, and this is important for us as business people, that in the world we are in now, your company should give more attention to digitization. We call it end-to-end digitization. And that means you must deliberately, tweak your business model to take into account whatever can be automated, what role can artificial intelligence play, and of course, the evolving metaverse, what does that mean for businesses? So I have a few sector expectations here as well, that is outlook, and then I will end it this way. And the end point here is that the reality we face this year is that the Nigerian population is not only large, but by our nature, our marginal propensity to consume is also very high. So if you do business in Nigeria, whatever you offer to sell, they will buy. Okay? In which case, the real challenge you face as a business person is to ask the question, what I produce, the consumers, who are they and where are they? So how do I get more of them to buy? And how do I get each of them to buy more? So in which case, it talks to the quality of your product. It also talks about service delivery. Very important. So if you look at all these things I've mentioned earlier, large population, youthful in nature, urbanized also, rapidly. In fact, Nigeria is one of the top 10 countries in the world that are rapidly urbanizing. And of course, deepening internet penetration. We are number 8 in the world in terms of internet penetration. And about 93% of Nigerians with access to internet, they do it on their phones. So again, what does that mean? That means as a business person, you will then have opportunity to pass information about your products and services more to people when you can get it on their phones. Just like we say in banking, that the next branch of First Bank is right there on your phone or any of your digital devices. Okay? So innovation is something you need to pay attention to. Strongly evolving payments infrastructure is enhancing the value and volume. Of course, we all know the diverse products of First Bank, and a lot of technology is driving that also to make it as convenient as possible for you. Finally, increasing attention to global competitiveness and ease of doing business. Let government worry about ease of doing business, but for you it's about, in spite of all these constraints, how do I become competitive globally? So that should be a question you ask every day. So in dealing with that, you look at your people, your strategy, your processes, and cash. So at that point, I will leave it for other experts to contribute. And what it says is a statement credited to Mandela. It says, it is in the character of growth that we learn from both pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Thank you so very much. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biodun Adedipe. You can hang on for a minute so that we can take some questions. Please, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask Dr. Biodun Adedipe some questions, some areas you may want him to throw light on. We'll take like 2-3 questions from the physical attendees and 2 or 3 questions from the virtual attendees. Okay, we'll have one here.
Thank you very much. That was a very good presentation, full of lots of numbers. My name is Onosoya Abim. I'm the Managing Director of PAN 54, a media and brand narratives company. One of the things that you said that I found very important was confidence. You talked about a recession being a lack of confidence. So in the context of First Bank helping my customers, how important is it, and indeed is it their role to try to inject confidence to help to soften the threat of a recession? Because, like you said, confidence is very important. Is that your view, or what do you say?
Hold your thoughts there, Dr. Biodun. I'll give you one question from the virtual audience. One of the audience asked, could you provide additional insights on why you think GDP grows fastest or faster during the Q4 period? That's the second question. Probably take additional one here before you give responses.
Thank you, Dr. Adedipe. I learned a lot this morning. I've seen a lot of information. But I just want to ask, you said youth population in Nigeria 18 years. So what do you do with 18 years, not educated, no opportunities? Okay? 2 is that you say rapid urbanization, and we're about 51%. So what happened to, so if you have 51%, I'm likely to hit 60 because we're all running away to cities, right? What happened to infrastructure not provided, and what happened to crime? Social crisis, anomie that you're going to see. Okay? So these are issues that...
Thank you. So, Dr. Biodun, you may respond to the 3 questions before we take another batch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so very much. Excellent questions. The first is about confidence. And the whole idea there simply is this, that when people have confidence, they go out and they do business normally. They seek for growth opportunities and also think of strategies to take advantage of those opportunities. But when confidence is dampened, instead of striving and reaching out for opportunities, they hold back. And so somebody now needs to give them, call it a push. And that is how it plays out with economic recession. It's like the comparison between motivation and self-motivation. So now motivation comes from outside. The self-motivation is driven from within. All right? So what is missed then, put it across with, and that is part of what First Bank is doing here. Now, this particular forum is designed to give confidence and hope to the customers of First Bank and make them realize that in spite of the challenges in the business environment in Nigeria, there are still opportunities for them to thrive. So that is my own interpretation, even though First Bank didn't tell me that. But that's my interpretation of it, which I think is good, all right? That this is giving hope and confidence to people. And I will also encourage you to please not be far from your bankers. Because I've been a banker myself before I now left for consulting. I know that bankers have access to information, okay? And they also do a lot of research. So you can be sure First Bank will continually, give you some support there and update information. Second question is about, this reference to fourth quarter being the typical quarter of the year that the economy grows fastest. That is proven by data. It's not my idea. Okay? Just like a friend of mine will always say, I believe God, basically. But for every other thing, I believe data. Which is to say, what is the data saying? Okay? So for us, therefore, it's about what data said historically. That if that's the pattern, they will expect that each time you get an average. In fact, it was the same concept we used to predict when Nigeria will exit the recession of 2016. Because many analysts then said we wouldn't get out of it in 2017. And we said, looking at data, the same pattern I just mentioned here, that we're likely to exit it. Even 0.01% growth of your GDP is enough to get you out of recession. So that is what we are saying. Yes, by data, it's not my idea. Third one, fantastic question. Median age, 18 years. And that's why we always, in fact, in the conversation I had yesterday on an Outlook, this issue came up with the DG of budget. And I said, governments do borrow, but there are two dimensions to borrowing. You can borrow to invest, that's an infrastructure. You can equally borrow to consume. Then he came up with an idea, a response, that we now said, maybe we need to engage our federal government to begin to look at their expenditure in a different way. And that relates to the question that Shegun asked. And that is now, if 50% of our population is below 18 years of age, the question would be education and also health, in fact. So we now agreed that, yes, investment in education and health should be treated as social capital. So we now also told Ben that maybe what we should begin to do is to look at the current expenditure and break it into components. The portion that relates to education and the health we treat as social infrastructure and treat as investment. Maybe when we begin to do things that way and also deal with the curriculum and ensure that curriculum actually aligns also with the world of work, so that we are producing graduates that fit into the need of the industry. So, and that deals with the issue of education. Now, on urbanization, that's why I said very important to raise there. Two major challenges anywhere you talk about urbanization. The first one you mentioned, yes, infrastructure. In fact, the basic one we always refer to is power. Once people come to the urban area, they get exposed to modern gadgets. And those modern gadgets are powered by electricity. So naturally, the demand for power also increases with urbanization. So the same thing goes with other infrastructure elements. So much pressure on them. That means we need to invest more in those. But secondly, there is also crime and slums. But a recent study done by McKinsey, which is an issue now, is one of the 5 thematic areas being looked at Davos in this World Economic Forum this January. And that is poverty. That in fact, poverty has been misinterpreted and wrongly defined and also politicized over the years. So what is being done now is to look at that freshly. And I have 3 sources I make reference to. McKinsey's one. McKinsey said to understand poverty, we need to look beyond countries and now talk about communities. So they took the global map and broke it into 40,000 communities. Because they now found that you can be in, let's say, Lagos, and you have endemic poverty in some sections, and there's also affluence in some other sections. Those are different communities. So therefore, in interpreting that, that will now come into talking about rural-urban migration. As more people migrate to urban areas, slums are created. In fact, sometime in 2018, when we counted slums in Lagos, we were told 680. And I began to rack my head, where are they? Because that figure came from the Commissioner for Planning in Lagos State. You know, at a discourse like this. He said they counted 680 slums in Lagos. I said, Lagos State? So, of course, that I could relate with what Mackenzie now said. That look at communities and at countries. Then secondly, ODI, Overseas Development Institute, is in London, UK. They also said that critically, they've observed in their research that talk about poverty has been politicized. That in fact, most advanced countries that claim to be affluent actually have a lot of poverty elements within. And also it's a global phenomenon, and that there's no reason to label any country as the poverty capital of the world. And then there's a particular book just published last week in the US. The author is a lecturer at the University of Maryland in the US. Sent me a summary of the book just last week, Saturday, and said, because I've been researching this area as well, and he said what he found is that there's also a misdefinition of poverty based on income. In fact, I used India to illustrate. He said to buy taco in India, you need the equivalent of 10 cents. But to buy taco in the US, you will need $10. He used that as illustration. It's the same taco, same quantity, same volume, same quality. But it's costing more in the US than it costs in India. So the question now is, how do you now label somebody who earns less than $2 in India as a poor person? Okay, that was what he used. But of course, the discourse is on now, also at Davos, like I said. Fantastic thing you raised there. In which case, we should begin to also envision how we respond to uptick in crimes as urbanization expands. And of course, the need to invest more in infrastructure because the demand will also grow. So thank you so very much for that perspective. Excellent.
Thank you, Doctor. And we'll take the next set of questions, and that will be all. Do you have any hand here? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Actually, mine is not a question. It's just a reflection. I think the demographics is actually a bright spot, the youth demographics. And provided we see it as the greatest opportunity and competitive, building block for Nigeria and respond appropriately, that may actually be the trigger for the takeoff of the country. Now, why do I say that? You find that in China, the process of opening up to using markets was brought about urbanization, well, rural-urban migration. But in China, it was contrived. And the urbanization, well, the drift from the rural areas was contrived to provide cheap labor for industry. Of course, China is now trying to ensure that the rural areas, the increased productivity and income from in the rural areas. So it's basically they've robbed the rural areas to develop China. Well, most countries do that, unfortunately. Now, in India, you still have a lot more of the poverty, poor people living in the rural areas. But what you find in India is that there are more clusters, other than manufacturing, that are active. And you would like to think that most of the people are engaged in those clusters. The tragedy in Nigeria is that the urbanization is resulting in slums. It's not resulting in productive activity. And that is when it will become a disaster. Now, there are two ways we can obviously leverage on that. We probably can't contrive like China to make it an avenue for cheap capital. It's already cheap. But we must engage, be sure that that urban population, which is mostly youth, is involved in productive activity. And that we try to ensure that there is sufficiently high productivity in whatever they're doing. And so that speaks to trying to ensure that there are clusters that can engage that population, and probably also trying to see that manufacturing, we find a way to get into manufacturing. Probably not a Dangote refinery, but various other types of, cottage industries and so on and so forth, while taking advantage, of course, taking strategic advantage of ensuring that the rural areas, we can get the productivity, agricultural productivity, and probably retain or probably drive a few more of the more productive youths back into agri-value chains in the rural areas. And I think it's our politicians, or rather our policymakers, who must, think properly and do the right things. And so infrastructure, we do need hard infrastructure, but we need more the investment in the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very interesting insight. I'll just take one more question. Okay. Let me give.
Doctor, we've been talking about this issue of urbanization and the impacts it's having on the urban area. We need to examine how it affects the rural area, particularly its impact on the food security we've been talking about. A lot of the youths have moved away from the rural areas. They come to urban areas without the urban areas being prepared for them to assimilate them into the productive segment of that environment. And we've seen these people abandon even the subsistence agriculture. And if you aggregate all these small farms and farmers' outputs, these are the kind of things that build into food security. Again, the insecurity in the rural area is part of what has aggravated this matter and keep pushing people. How does that help us as a nation? And how are we going to get the biggest chunk of the inflation is food inflation?
Yeah.
And this is the direct result of the abandoned rural areas. How do we get all this reversed to keep the system running again? Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Chief, for that perspective. We'll take one more question within the...
Thank you very much, Dr. Adedikpe. Very extremely insightful presentation. My name is Lillian Olubi, the CEO of EFG Hermes Nigeria. Slightly tangential perspective. And I'm a capital markets operator with very keen interest in the entertainment sector. And as I listen to you reel out the 6 critical or most productive sectors, I'm curious to know your thoughts around, or your views around the entertainment industry and how much of it we are not harnessing. When you look at the proliferation of our music across the world, literally, you see the demand for our content and just everything that's happening there. And then again, the intersection, I guess, of finance and entertainment, where you think finance institutions can help that sector and where we can find the middle. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much. So we have 3.
Doctor, can you take the last one here?
Yeah, because there are only
so
2 questions.
Yes.
Well, okay, there's still one more to take. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Adedikpe. Yes. My name is Osaho, and I work for First Bank. So you mentioned this issue around competitiveness. I mean, Innocent export a few vehicles to Sierra Leone or Liberia. That's not the game, really. That's not the game. The game is the capacity of Nigeria to produce vehicles, for example, using that example, at a competitive price and value. That's the game. If every company in Nigeria is battling 13 to 20 different types of taxes from state, federal, local government, if you have to be your own power generating company and every other thing we know, you cannot be competitive. It's as simple as that. There's no nuclear physics in it. The guy producing in Benin Republic will produce cheaper than you. The power is stable. He doesn't have to worry about water. He's not worrying about so many tax authorities. So once we are not competitive, the 18-year-old median age we are talking about is going to be waiting to buy a car from Japan or from Ghana because they're going to produce a car there better than we can. So the first question is a competitive question. Now, it takes its roots. My question takes its roots. So how do we deal with that? That's the issue. And it takes its root from our macro system is dysfunctional. In fact, the fiscal system, the Minister of Finance said 2 weeks ago that they are borrowing to pay debt. It's that bad. We are borrowing to pay debt because look at the budget, 22 trillion, we are generating 9 trillion. So we already have the big story about the ways and means, which is another discussed for another day, but you already have a new budget where you want to deficit finance 12 trillion. What kind of maths are we doing here? So there are so many questions. I understand you want to put the positive spin. These are businessmen we have here, so everybody goes positive. But the real reality that faces us is we are borrowing to pay salaries of federal civil servants. We are borrowing to service our debts. The numbers don't add up.
All right, so I will make a few
Thank you,
comments on
Osaho.
that.
Doctor,
Right. Yeah.
I would like to crave your indulgence. Let's take one of the questions from the virtual attendees.
Okay.
And the question says, could you give your prognosis on the current food crisis and continuous rising cost of basic building materials, cement, steel, and other vital construction materials?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will deal with the questions, the comments made earlier, fantastic on demographics. Then the reference to rural impact of urbanization. I'll just give a simple illustration and point to what I believe the solution direction is. Now, there's one of the drivers of a divisional MD of the Dangote Group, a family friend. This fellow said his family is a family of farmers around Maiduguri, and that on the average in a year they produce 200 bags, and that is talking about 200 kg bags, not 50 kg. At least in their own small farm, they produce about 200 such bags. But the guy left farming and came to Lagos to become a driver in Dangote Group. Okay? I just gave that to illustrate, the response to your question. So the key to that is security in the rural areas. That's it. No other thing. So because for me, the interpretation is simple. Anything that makes me afraid to go to farm, which is my basic economic activity, and afraid of for my life, is terrorism, simple and clear. All right? So in which case, government must address the security issue frontally and treat it with a sense of urgency. So until we deal with that, we can't tinker with the two elements of food security, which I mentioned earlier on. Availability and, of course, affordability. Now, the other question relates to entertainment. Yes. Entertainment industry in Nigeria is burgeoning, okay, growing by the day. But when you look at the aggregate GDP, and that's why you don't see it as a big number there. Even though it is growing, but it's not a big number there. The whole idea now is for us to consider that, how do we grow that sector? Okay, we develop rich content that the world appreciates. But how do we grow that? How do we leverage it? Take, for example, the average movie maker. What do they spend, in making a movie? What is the average spend? It's very, very intangible, okay, compared to what you see. So by the time you say you have broken the box office here in Nigeria, that means you have gone beyond the cost of making the movie. You find that the value involved is next to nothing compared to what happens elsewhere. We generate the numbers in terms of numbers that we produce, but the value is not commensurate with the content. So that means we need to have more funding attracted to that industry. And that's the only way we can extract more value from it, in my own thinking. Then the question on competitiveness, is an issue we can argue from today to tomorrow. The fact is that if Sierra Leone bought Innosim vehicles, there's a reason for them to choose Innosim. Not for patriotism. They chose it for value, in terms of quality that they expect it to deliver for them, and in terms of the cost to them. We cannot, underrate that. Proforce also exports its vehicles from Nigeria and a couple of others. So we cannot ignore those. Those are realities, okay? Those countries in Africa where they import those vehicles from certainly have other options as well. So they must have reasons for importing those vehicles made here in Nigeria, by all means. So we must not, of course, at the same time, we are not saying that government should sit back and relax. We still have a lot of work to do on the ease of doing business. A whole lot of work to do there to be globally competitive. But the issue, for example, for me, let me take myself as a business person in Nigeria. I face all these challenges. Everyone here, especially the manufacturers, you have 74 different taxes that confront you from your factory to the market. That's to the consumer. 74 of them in number. So those things need to be addressed by the government. Hopefully, the incoming government will deal with that. Okay? Those are issues we cannot contest. But the point is this. In spite of these constraints, what must I do in order to grow my business? I told myself I've been analyzing this economy for years, pointing out agri contributes the most to our GDP. I then asked myself one day, how many clients do I have in the agri sector? This was like 4 years ago. But between then and now, the client base of BA Consult has changed, including agri ventures in Germany, in Kenya, and other countries. Okay? That's what we are talking about here. That when you interpret this, what does this mean for you? So we recognize the challenges, yes. Let government worry about their own headache. Okay? We also keep policy advocacy. We keep doing that. All right? But we must still do business in spite of those constraints. The final one, food crisis, I've mentioned the key thing to food crisis in Nigeria is security. Once we deal with security, food security in Nigeria also will improve. And of course, the issue of my prognosis about building materials is a very simple one. Where do they come from? If they don't come from outside, how about the inputs into their production? Insofar as the inputs or the products themselves are from outside Nigeria, then the exchange value of the naira becomes an issue. So, and then you now have to also look at how will that likely change? And you can't get it better than for First Bank. So thank you so very much. God bless.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abiodun Adedipe. That was very insightful. Please, can we give him another round of applause? So we are moving on to our next item on the agenda, and that is the panelist discussion. And I promise you, we've assembled experts in various areas of business, economy, banking, manufacturing, consumer, and everywhere. And we're going to have an interesting discussion with them. Please, for those joining us virtually, continue to post your questions and we'll pick them up and address as many as possible. And those we can't address in the forum, we'll address post the forum. So I will welcome the panelists onto the podium. And so we have 4 panelists. 1 will be joining virtually, and 3 are on ground here with me. And I will be the moderator for the day. So I will welcome Ugodri. Ugodri is a chartered accountant with extensive working experience covering accounting, corporate finance, financial management, corporate strategy, business development, change management, and personal finance. He's also a certified investor relations practitioner and registered member of the UK Investor Relations Society. Ugodri is a respected personal finance advocate financial analyst, public speaker, and blogger. He's written several articles, including financial literacy, Nigeria, stock market, and economy. He's one of the pioneers of personal finance advocacy in Nigeria, and he has created several personal finance and small business shows on radio, podcasts, social media, and YouTube, where his content is highly regarded. As part of his goals of spreading financial literacy, investor advocacy, and economic literacy, Ugodre continues to host several online and offline programs. His Everyday Money Matters on Lagos Talks radio is a leading investment and personal finance show on the airwaves. His insights and deep knowledge of the working of the Nigerian economy is highly regarded. He's also a lead anchor of Business Half Hour, a weekly radio show targeted at giving founders and up-and-coming business startups in Nigeria visibility and connection to the Lagos market. Welcome, Ugodre. Thank you, Ugodre, for attending. I call on the next panelist, Ini Ebong. Ini Ebong is the Executive Director, Treasury and International Banking Group. Ini has over 20 years extensive banking experience, working through a wide variety of trading roles across most treasury products, assets, liability, treasury sales, marketing, and treasury and treasury risk management. Ini is the market person. He understands the market environment. He was previously the head of African Fixed Income and Local Markets Trading, Renaissance Securities Nigeria Limited, the Nigerian registered subsidiary of Renaissance Capital. He also worked as a Citi Group treasurer in Nigeria. He has a passion for market development and has worked actively to drive change and internationalization of the Nigerian financial markets, including foreign exchange, fixed income, and securities. He has worked closely with regulatory bodies such as CBN and DMO to develop fresh monetary and foreign exchange policies to broaden and deepen markets and open them up for international best practices. At various times, he has facilitated program seminars in a wide variety of subjects covering money markets, securities and foreign exchange trading, market risk management to investors, to regulators, as well as market participants. Thank you, Ini, and we expect great insight from him on various market topics here today. So please, virtual audience, continue to post your questions. We'll take them on as the panelists come on board. I'll also introduce Tosin Adewuyi. Tosin Adewuyi is the Executive Director, Corporate Banking, First Bank Group. And I want to believe some of the customers here know Tosin very well. He's a passionate international banker with over 25 years experience covering sub-Saharan Africa. He's proficient in developing and implementing growth strategies and supporting businesses to grow their businesses. And he's a trusted advisor to most of the businesses that he comes in contact with. And we've got great testimonies about how he has supported various First Bank customers to grow their businesses, to provide bespoke funding for them and advice for them that have made them to grow. So I urge both current and potential customers to look out for Tosin and his team to give them those advices that will ensure that they grow their businesses. He was previously the managing director and the head of JP Morgan Nigerian business for several years. In his role, he led the execution of JP Morgan's strategy for Nigeria and managed key client relationships as a JP Morgan head in Nigeria. Some of those relationships include Central Bank of Nigeria, Ministry of Finance, Debt Management Office, Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, and top-tier Nigerian banks in Nigeria. So he is well connected in the financial services space. So he brings those insights onto the panel today. Tosin was a member of the JP Morgan Europe, Middle East, and Africa Diversity Committee and one of the senior members of the Black Organization for Leadership Development. He's a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, and he holds a BA in economics and accounting from University of Manchester. Tosi was on the 2012 Power List. That Power List is on business, finance, and IT as one of the top 100 influential black people in the UK. That's the quality of panelists we are bringing to you today. He is also an honorary member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. Welcome once again, Tosi Adewoye. And I will be introducing our virtual panelist, who is Moshope Arubayi. Moshope Arubayi is a trained economist with extensive experience in financial and international economics. She will be bringing her unique experience on board as a panelist today. Moshope has worked in top investment banks in Nigeria, including Vetiva and CSL stockbrokers. Her macro expertise cuts across emerging market asset classes across sub-Saharan Africa and has produced insights, information, and recommendations to investors around the world covering African equities, fixed income, and FX. So that experience she'll be bringing on board. She'll be giving us insights around this area, where to invest and what asset classes are going to give us the best outcomes. She's particularly passionate about the African Renaissance and the traditional and disruptive forces that can shape the African economy. So welcome once more, my panelists, and I'll be joining them right away and we get started. Please, virtual audience, continue to post your questions while we get into the business of today. Thank you once again. Moshope, I hope you can hear us.
Perfectly.
Excellent. So welcome, Moshope. I'll start today's panelist discussion. Ugo, I will start with you. Dr. Adedipe did mention in his presentation how the Chinese authorities have recently eased its zero COVID in response to extraordinary public outburst, as well as to boost economic recovery. What will be the likely impact of this action on the global energy crisis if the Russian and Ukraine crisis continues? And how should businesses position to successfully ride the waves of emerging energy scenarios in 2023? Now, I would like you to speak specifically how that impacts Nigerian businesses and how they continue to position, because we are likely going to see a continuous, or what will be your perspective on what the energy situation will be and how would Nigerian businesses respond to that? Thank you so much, Ugo Drio.
All right, thank you so much, Chike. Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for having me. Also, thank you, Doctor, for that amazing presentation. Very interesting question. I think late last year, the world saw what can typically happen when you push human beings to the brink. I think in 2020, 2021, everyone was basically awed by how China was able to contain the COVID-19 crisis. And then, while the world was now getting out of COVID-19, it appears China is getting back into COVID-19, and that's basically what triggered, the spate of lockdowns we had late last year. But of course, people can't, stay locked in for too long, and that's why now you have the Chinese government basically rolling back a lot of the lockdowns that they had. Now, the impact of that on the world, of course, is a Chinese economy that is open to the world means that businesses, production is back on the table. The fear was that if China remains a lockdown, then global production would slow, and of course that has potential impacts on energy crisis. But far from that, I think the most impact that we'll probably see would come from the Russia-Ukraine war. I had thought that we would see a de-escalation in the first quarter of this year. And that was because towards the end of last year, it appeared maybe Russia was sort of slowing down, the war was waning, and maybe Ukraine was getting upper hand. But we've seen an escalation in recent times, and And now what you're seeing is the West essentially backing Ukraine even further. I think there are plans to even extend warships, war tanks to Ukraine. So what that means is that the war is likely going to escalate rather than de-escalate, at least over the next few weeks, if not months. So put those things together, and what you have is a different energy setup for the world. In response, what the West has essentially done is to put what you call an oil price cap on Russia's crude. So today, the G7 countries have said, look, any G7 country, including Australia, who wants to buy oil from Russia, you can't pay more than $60 for Russian oil. So what that does essentially is it puts a cap, or it's sort of like it normalizes the volatility that we saw last year. So it appears the projection is that we probably won't see oil prices above $100 like we saw, most of last year. I think currently oil prices probably around $83, and the projection is that it's probably going to be along those lines, and that's because of some of the things that Europe has done. Now, the Europeans also, contrary to what a lot of people thought, have enough gas reserves now to take them through the cold winter period. People thought that they were going to, have a bit of shortage, but that hasn't happened. And so for Nigeria, here's what I think this means for us. I think oil prices at about $83 just means that we're slightly going to be above, our benchmark. Not enough savings for, external our ECA, excess crude accounts. There's also a potential risk. Russia would likely sell more oil to India and most Asian countries, which is what they've basically turned their attention to. And let's also remember that India is Nigeria's top oil purchaser. India buys most of Nigeria's oil. And guess what's happening now? The likes of India and most Asian countries, even China, are now asking Russia for discounts. So they are so powerful now because of the sort of demand that they provide. They're asking for discounts. So that also has connotations for us here in Nigeria. So that means that our own oil prices could also suffer, or we might probably also need to offer some kind of discount just so that we can have our crude being bought. And let's remember what Doctor said as well. We still face potential issues with crude oil production. We're not even anywhere close to the OPEC quota that we've been given. So we even have our own internal struggles. So by and large, I think that you won't see a lot of changes when it comes to Nigeria with Russia, Ukraine. I think it's likely going to be the same, because even when oil price was above $100, we didn't gain much from it in this country because we have our own internal issues. But let's even assume that we go past our internal issues and we start to supply at 1415. What you tend to see is perhaps maybe government revenue, inch up a little bit higher, but oil prices will likely remain at $83. So I don't see any major impact for Nigeria. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ugodre. There's the portion of the question I would like you to touch. So what you're saying is Nigerian businesses should just relax. No surprises beyond what we see today.
Well, so I won't want to say relax. I think that what is very clear is a lot of the fallouts of the Russia-Ukraine crisis still exist today. So I don't see any more changes. And so what that means is that inflation rate is likely going to remain high. I think that will probably taper off towards the third, fourth quarter of this year. And that's basically because of base effects, not because maybe prices have now improved. You still see fuel prices will likely still go up because oil prices are at $83. That's also if they take out fuel subsidies. So I think for us, it's not a net positive, but things would likely remain as it is. So a lot of the challenges that we had with a lot of the energy crisis issues we had last year will still persist this year. I think some of the impacts were electricity price increases, increases in input costs for a lot of manufacturing companies who also rely on things like diesel, most of which we import. So those things will still remain this year. They're not going away. For them to go away, then I guess you're expecting oil prices to sort of fall below maybe $60, and that I doubt will happen. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ugodre, for your insight. Tosi, I will turn to you. You're on my left-hand side, so please, the next question will go to you. In Dr. Abiodo's presentation, he did mention that the African Free Trade Area Agreement has over $3 trillion potential in revenues for African countries within the African market. What would be your advice to businesses, investors who may want to explore the opportunities within the African Continental Free Trade Agreement area? And how is First Bank, as a trusted financial partner, supporting or plan to support businesses who may want to explore opportunities in other African markets? Thank you.
Thank you, Chike, and morning and welcome to everyone, both in the room and virtually. Okay, brilliant question and massive opportunity. We, as a bank, very recently, one of the things we've done, and I'm now changing direction following Doctor's opening slide, challenges and opportunities. So I've made a conscious decision to start with the opportunities and not focus on the challenges. But it's all about opening up completely new markets to clients that we have in the bank. One, we're a Pan-African bank, so we have experience in other markets where we have a presence. So a classic example of what we've done recently with clients, and I know it's here, it's clients. We have taken a number of clients into DRC, which is a massive market in Africa, where they have no business today. They've spent time looking at their sector and trying to understand how they can expand into those markets. Typically, as banks, we follow clients into new markets. I think that is changing on its head. We're now also taking clients into the markets where we actually have a presence. The opportunity is big, but the challenges are also numerous. We have had a number of clients, and sorry, I'm assuming everybody understands really how the zone will now work. Basically, it's now one massive market. Let's just think about how the EU used to be before clearly Brexit came through. So customs, duties, taxes, it just becomes one market where you can move freely across. And at some point, the aspiration is that 90% of all goods and services will flow through without taxes. Of course, easier said than done. We have a number of clients on the back of trying to generate FX, trying to export to neighboring countries. I mean, the length of time it will take you to get goods across two borders. At one point, it was 52 days. At one point, it came down to about 35. They just imagine the productivity that's been burned. So it hasn't been easy. It's early days, but of course we have to stay optimistic that we will get through it. And at some point, Africa will start to trade better with itself. And I think that's the whole idea. So really it's about new markets. In Doctor's narrative, he gave an example of two customers. One was Proforce, one was Innocent. Proforce goes all the way to Rwanda. They do armored vehicles. And so they have now become a major player in the armored space across Africa on the back of migrating into different markets. So it's a massive opportunity for our clients who have scale, who have expertise, and are able to tap into the opportunities that other markets essentially offer. Many of the stuff that we do, many of the stuff that our clients are involved in requires significant investment. You make the investments in Nigeria, it's easier then to just export those expertise, the goods, the presence into other markets. You have made that investment once, and it's easy just to migrate that across, and that's something that we assist clients to do. Sorry, Chika, I'm trying to be brief. So that I don't
Thank you so much, Tosi. In fact, you're actually giving a very good thought around that. Just to re-echo what Tosi says, First Bank is your partner bank if you're exploring the African Continental Free Trade Agreement opportunities. First Bank can take you to any of the markets that you'll be interested in, and First Bank will lead you all the way as your trusted partner. Tosin, is that correct?
Spot on.
Thank you, Tosin. Ini, I will be coming to you right away. I will also reference Dr. Adedikwe's Abiodun's presentation. He did mention that it is anticipated that there will be accelerated manufacturing and focus on export promotion in 2023. And that is likely going to bring some stability within the FS environment. Is that your views? And what will you be telling businesses that have outstanding FS obligation so that they will be able to, they will not be caught up if there is any potential downside and suffer some FS losses? Probably if you can give them some advice on how to reduce that losses or how to even avoid it as they navigate 2023. Thank you, Ini.
Good morning, everybody. I mean, certainly for the last couple of years, FX availability, FX pricing has been topical, especially for clients of ours, importers, manufacturers, and everybody. I would say that I'm a little more optimistic in FY 2023 in terms of us getting some degree of, I would say, normalization in FX markets. And why do I say this? Arguably, for the last couple of years, the central bank has had to embark on what I would call unorthodox monetary policy measures, because Nigeria has been faced with a big fiscal problem, and the central bank has tried to intervene to address that. But a number of things have changed recently, or we started to see more positive signs that the fiscal imbalance is being addressed. So oil production is going up, so we start to deal with the revenue problems. There seems to be a much more realistic assessment of the need to deal with the fuel subsidies, which is consuming significant fiscal resources. So again, we have the election. We'll have a change in government which will come next month. And all the leading candidates are saying the right things economically. So that suggests we will have some change in policy. Arguably, one of the key tenets of this administration has been FX rate stability. So in many ways, it's hampered the central bank's ability for a little more flexibility in currency management. So when I look at that outlook, it suggests we get a bit of that flexibility. We've also seen the central bank's policy bias change. So we're now encouraging higher interest rates. So it's more of a normalization in interest rates, the interest rate environment. I'm sorry, but Nigeria is not a low interest rate environment. So to have single-digit interest rates in Nigeria is not tenable. When you look at our inflationary environment, we've got inflation north of 20%. We are typically a mid-teen interest rate environment. So when we have normalization of macroeconomic variables, then we can have a meaningful discussion around where our FX rate needs to be, right? Because you will agree with me, if we have an official rate in the 400s and we have a parallel market rate almost twice that, it breeds too much speculation, right? So when I look at the outlook, one is hopeful that a little later in the year, we will start to have some degree of a serious attempt towards a little more currency management that's more flexible, and then FX rate convergence, which means that liquidity will then flow in. So in the interim, what do we advise customers to do? We advise you to try and reduce exposure, which means exploring opportunities that exist in the I&E market, aside from relying or trying to rely solely on the central bank's auction. Quite frankly, there's not enough liquidity in there. Hedging tools exist. We do advise a few clients where possible to use the futures market if it's there. But more fundamentally, you need to close your exposure. The way to look at it is whatever you get in the I&E, whatever you get in the central bank, you have an effective rate which is lower. Because The reality is most of corporate Nigeria is benefiting from the embedded arbitrage in here. I always tell people devaluation has already happened. Nigeria is priced today at an effective exchange rate which is not at 460. It's where the market is. So where you do look at a blended FX rate, you are already ahead. Reality is it's going to be a little volatile, but I think the outlook suggests that we are on the right path. We still have ways to go, but there's a lot more that needs to be done in normalizing the other variables, and then we can start to see a lot. Hopefully we'll start to see more flexibility, probably post-election into Q2. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ini. Moshokwe, I will turn to you right away. As we get into 2023, there's likely going to be increased focus by the Nigerian government to promote exports, and this is likely going to be done through incentives as well as greater efficiency in processing export transactions. In your view, Moshokwe, which of the sectors in the Nigerian economy holds the most attractive opportunities for exports, and what would you be telling any business that wants to explore export business in Nigeria? Thank you, Moshokwe.
Right. Thanks, Chike, for your question. Just as Dr. Adedipe said earlier, Nigeria has multiple viable natural resource endowments from a number of sectors. We have hydrocarbons, we have metals, and even agricultural products, all of which are export worthy. Where I, however, think the problem lies is in the gradual deindustrialization of the economy that has left us focusing more on exporting raw commodities rather than adding value to the commodities through industrial processing, so we can export them as intermediate or finished goods, which are obviously more valuable to the global market. So I would say policies that would attract investment into the manufacturing sector should be prioritized, as it will have like significant backward linkages to a few of the sectors that Dr. Adedipe highlighted as the key economic sectors that propel growth, and also have positive knock-on effects on not just the external sector vis-a-vis export, but also the real sector through accelerated economic growth. And it could also better the government's fiscal profile vis-a-vis a wider tax base. However, for that sector, two major challenges that I feel the sector has experienced over the past few years that has resulted in the gradual decline of the sector's performance has been restricted access to FX, which Ini just highlighted at the official window, and then the erratic electricity supply. So people, business owners that are looking to play in the manufacturing sector should actually factor in the cost of resorting to alternatives. Or, I mean, you can always speak to your bank. First Bank is always there to give you good advice in terms of how to source for FX or how to deal with your FX transactions if you need to import material for your manufacturing business. And then you may also want to look at alternative sources of power, since we're yet to get to the bottom of we're yet to get a viable solution to the epileptic power supply that we're contending with in Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Moshokwe. Tosi, I will turn to you right away. Dr. Abiodun did mention that there is potential in the Nigerian economy, and we all know that SMEs are actually the major drivers of every economy that has experienced growth over the last couple of decades. As a bank, how is First Bank supporting SMEs who have intention to grow their businesses in 2023? Specific things First Bank is doing for SMEs to promote their objective. Thank you, Tosin.
Thanks, Chike, and great question. I think through my career, I probably haven't focused on SMEs up until a couple of years ago. And this came to me strongly at the time. There was a guy who was doing some work for me, some furniture, and I think I gave him some work to do. It was about 2 million naira, many years ago now. And he did a good job, so I referred him to somebody else, and that person referred him to somebody else. And just about a year ago, I got a call from one of the people who I had referred him to, who apparently he makes doors, he's into carpentry business, who apparently had been using him and had given him 200 million worth of jobs in the last year, and had referred him to a fellow developer who was double his own size. And the developer was going to give him a contract or a job for about 350 million. And he was just calling me to ask, the guy you introduced to me, by the way, where did you really know him from? Because the numbers are getting bigger. And it just suddenly occurred to me that this guy had moved from like a 2 million balance sheet to 600 million balance sheet in the space of 3 or 4 years, something like that. So I called him, and he had now become much larger. He had his own factory. And what usually happens, people always think is all about collateral. It's really not just about collateral. That's one of the major issues. And for collateral, SMEs really don't have collateral. That's the bottom line. So it's about developing the products that mean you can lend to them without collateral. That's what our first traded product does. So we have a range of products that speak exactly to that. But more importantly, and overnight I became a coach or mentor, accidental mentor to this guy. What they need more than anything else is expertise, access to markets, just like the large corporates. They also need referrals. They also need to understand how to do their accounting, how to structure their contracts, how to use a lawyer, how to negotiate with the bank. All of this stuff, what kind of tools to use. So all of this stuff, again, First Bank has put together a basket of advice and experts to assist them. This is our SME Connect. SME Connect exactly addresses that requirement. And also we have all sorts of team-ups with people like Microsoft, where we're coming, using our leverage, offering products, again, to SMEs. So it's a massive space. There's a lot of trade going on through SMEs. To be honest, I actually don't think you can industrialize the country without having SMEs, a solution for SMEs. But specifically to what we're doing in First Bank, it's a focus. We have designed our products around their needs, and always happy to engage a lot more SME type companies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tosin. So it would be right to say that First Bank is your SME bank. If you're an SME and you intend to grow your business, please, your first point of call is First Bank. First Bank Connect is there for you to connect to. I'll turn to you, Ugodre. Ugodre, government plans to remove subsidy by second half of this year. In your view, how will this impact key sectors of the economy? And what should businesses, households, and individuals be doing right away to better be prepared for that eventual economic scenario? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think if you've been in this country for the last 6-7 years, fuel subsidy removal is one thing that has been on the table for years. I mean, some of us look back to the days of 2011 when the government tried to remove it at the time, and some of us here probably led protests and all that, and almost 11 years or 12 years down the line, we're still on this fuel subsidy issue. But it looks like now it's likely going to go. I think the aspirants that we have now have all mentioned that they're going to take away fuel subsidy. So it's very likely that it might go. So what does this mean? I think it means a lot for different industries, and I will just run through some of the things that I've noted. For example, fuel subsidy removal automatically should lead to increase in fuel prices. That is already happening. I think it's only in places like Lagos that you still buy fuel at pump price. If you go to up north in the east, south, you get fuel prices at 300, 350. So what that essentially means is that cost of goods and services are likely going to go up, particularly for companies that rely on energy to power their production. We've also seen it would also lead to a lot of move towards renewable energy. A lot of companies as well are moving towards solar powered energy. Lithium batteries market, I think, would see a major boost this year. There's a lot of investment as well coming in that space, particularly via grants. A lot of companies, especially with international affiliations, have different targets, energy efficiency targets, and that have been cascaded from G7 countries. So a lot of them now are more energy sensitive. So there's also going to be limited or reduced reliance on things like maybe diesel powered engines. I think people will move more towards renewable and even towards the grid. So opportunities there for the power sector as well, whether it's distribution companies or those that provide renewable energy services. I think the opportunities there for them. You would also see a change in social behavior. Think about it. When you start to see fuel prices go up, people now start to become a lot more sensitive. So I suspect that the days of luxury car buying will reduce. We shrink further to just a few people. A lot of Nigerians will also move towards, Japanese cars, fuel efficient cars. I think that cars that are less fuel efficient would suffer. So people who import, vehicles as well, I think you see rising demand for more fuel efficient cars. I also suspect that this would also be the foundation for EVs, which is electric vehicles. A lot more people will start to look towards EVs. It's still a little pricey, but I think the first wave of major EV vehicles, you should expect to see them, at some point this year. Because with fuel prices going up, people would be, want to conserve more. I also suspect that there would also be a lot more ride sharing. So people would hardly commute. So currently, if you enter an Uber or a Bolt, you enter on your own and you just pay, maybe 2.5 and it takes you to your destination. I think behavior will change. So you can't pay. Someone was trying to take a cab from Jakonde to Ikeja a few days ago, and the transport cost was 12,000 naira due to surge. So people can't afford that anymore. And what he did was to call a colleague so that he could ride with the colleague. So you're going to see a lot more ride sharing this year as well. So what that means is that there's also opportunities in the transportation sector. Government would also need to invest heavily in mass transportation. I think there'll be pressure for more rail services. So it's going to change the entire landscape, of the country and in general. For businesses as well, I think that cost would likely go up in the interim, whether it's financial institutions, whether it's manufacturing companies. Everybody relies on energy, whether it's fuel or diesel. So you would see rising costs, and that would also trigger change in the way we manage our logistics. So you're going to see a lot more outsourcing. You want to outsource, a lot of your energy needs or your logistics needs for your staff. And finally, please do not be surprised if you see increased pressure from Gen Zs for work from home. They're not going to be able to cope because right now they don't have the sort of purchasing power that you'd expect to fight things like fuel subsidy. So a lot of them will demand for work from home, and if they don't get it, they'll likely want to leave. So that also leads to a job crisis down the line for organizations who don't innovate quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ugodre. In fact, I just picked one very important thing. There's an opportunity for ride-sharing business. So it could be an extension to what the ride-hailing companies are doing today. It could be a totally different opportunity, even from an informal space. So entrepreneurs begin to think about ride-sharing opportunity. Thank you so much, Ugodre. Winnie, I will be coming back to you right away. We'd like to get your thoughts on what the market interest rate trajectory is likely going to be in 2023, and how should businesses and investors position to take advantage of whatever that is in the interest rate environment. Thank you, Eni.
Okay. Like I said earlier, Nigeria is not a low interest rate environment. And I think earlier on this year, the central bank started the path towards normalization of interest rates. Arguably, in the last 2 years, the central bank has engendered a low interest rate environment, and it's understandable when you look at the amount of intervention they needed to do on the back of the COVID-induced pandemic, right? Government needed to borrow, and they needed to fund the government at a cheap rate, so that's why they created that environment, in my own opinion. But we started the path towards normalization, and we can see that the monetary policy bias has changed. So the MPR has been hiked. There's incremental tightening of monetary conditions, so interest rates will rise. Like I mentioned before, Nigeria is a mid-teen interest rate environment, so we will see those rates trend upwards. So we would advise customers to brace for that. Cost of credit will go up, but it's all in a path to normalize the monetary conditions. If you look at where inflation is, if we are going to try to moderate the impact of the currency adjustment that will likely come, then interest rates will have to go up. So this is the time for corporates to get your borrowing needs in, secure your funding. You should talk to us now so you get in ahead of the curve. But the reality is we will start that path. The central bank has signaled it. The incoming administration, at least if we listen to the various politicians and leading candidates, all of them appear to be more pro-market in their thinking, at least based on the manifestos they're declaring. So it suggests that they will allow a more market-determined approach to economic management. So it suggests we then move towards more normalization. So we are going to face a higher rate environment in the near term, but I think it's a good thing because it then allows normalcy in our macroeconomic variables. And arguably, that's not what we've had in the last couple of years. So we've had to have quite a number of various types of intervention, which allows for speculation, arbitrage, and so on and so forth. But I think the prospects look a lot more clearer going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ini. Moshokwe, I will come back to you right away. Moshokwe, are you there? Can you hear me, Moshokwe?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
yes.
Excellent. Yeah. I will come to you right away. There seems to be a growing interest by corporate and sovereign on green energy, as well as very, very strong consumer interest in energy efficiency. What does this mean for Nigeria? And how should, what should businesses be looking at in terms of opportunities within the green energy space, in your view? Thank you, Moshokwe.
Thanks very much, Chike, for the question. I had mentioned earlier that the erratic power situation in Nigeria is a major headwind for businesses. So Nigeria's transition from consumption to industrialization cannot be realized with our current energy capacity. For a country that has like an estimated energy demand of about 98,000 megawatts and an installed generation capacity of around 16,000 megawatts, is quite underwhelming. So the growing investment in cleaner energy sources expands the power alternatives available to businesses and could reduce their reliance on the unreliable centralized grid system. I mean, the initial installation cost for green energy kits could be high, but spread over the life of the kits, it's more cost efficient compared to the cost of using traditional energy sources that sometimes may not be climate friendly. And for investors, the opportunities to invest exist in solar home systems that can power single family homes or mini grid systems rather that can power small communities of homes, as well as scaling of these systems.
Thank you so much, Moshope. Tosi, I will come back to you right away. And drawing from the presentation made by Dr. Abiodun Adedipe, he did mention that gas development and production is receiving high interest from both investors and businesses. My question to you, as the executive in charge of corporate banking, what is First Bank doing specifically to support businesses who are interested in going into or who are already operating in the gas sector to expand their businesses and also grow their revenue? What support is First Bank rendering, or how are we supporting them? Thank you, Tosin.
Thank you, Chike. And one of the oil and gas veterans he just left a few minutes ago. I was actually going to put him on the spot. So there is a lot of interest in gas, and last year, as a bank, we spent quite a significant amount of time and resources analyzing all sorts of investments that in the end did not happen. So we are not seeing enough people take investment decisions to proceed on a go, no go. But I think it's only a matter of time, because ultimately it's all about gas. It's a cleaner fuel, and that's really the direction to go, no doubt about that. We spend time analyzing, again, when it comes to gas projects, it's not really just about the balance sheet. The balance sheet, which is the funding, of course, we have, but it's also about making sure that these projects are viable projects. And usually these are more long-term type of projects, so they require a lot more due diligence. They require to have the right type of contractors on, the equipment. Export credit agencies are often involved. So we bring all sorts of ideas and expertise to the table and spend a lot of time with the clients on the structuring. It's really not just about the project just popping up, but there's at least a couple of years of structuring that can go into making the decision. This is where we bring the expertise that we have. So we have 2 oil and gas heads that spend a lot of time with me, out with clients going through the opportunity. I can see one of them is Toyin. Please raise up your hand so people know who you are. And Temitayo, I think he's escorted a client out. But it's an area where we're extremely strong, Chike, as you know. A lot of heavy lifting involved. You really want to be speaking to a bank who has not just the capacity, the balance sheet, but also the expertise and the experience. It's also not just about attracting Nigerian banks. It's also about attracting the right type of partner banks outside of the country, because often these are sizable type projects. But we're expecting that this year will deliver a number of closed projects. And there are all sorts of projects in terms of size. Of course, the jumbo one is this pipeline that runs from Nigeria to Morocco at some point. Who knows? I mean, $25 billion is a lot of money right now in the context of what we're going through in Nigeria. But again, at least people are talking about it, and maybe some of the structuring has started. So it's really about stimulating the investment, Chike, and we're present as far as that is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tosin. What I'd heard, and I hope I heard well, that First Bank is the bank that has capacity to fund, expertise to guide, as well as the reach to connect you to both technical partners and financial partners within the global space. And First Bank is your right partner for gas development and production transactions. Thank you, Tosin. I will be throwing the panelists open to the audience, both virtually and in person here. So we'll take some questions from the in-person audience, as well as some questions from the virtual audience. Any takers for the in-person audience to the panelists? Any area you may want them to just make some few comments or clarify?
Hello, good afternoon. Is it afternoon yet? My name is Fiona Ahime, and I manage the equities broking business of the FBNH Group. So my question is, I mean, everybody says, economics say the capital market is a barometer of the economy, so measures how the economy is performing. The Nigerian capital market has actually not measured up to where, the advanced world is. My question is, in a high interest rate environment, and as a bank guiding our clients, what is our view in terms of if our clients are looking to access alternative source of funding? So for example, more liquidity through listing by introduction or raising an IPO just to balance their books. What are we doing as a bank to manage that? And how do we intend to help the subsidiary to grow that business and play actively there? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll be throwing that question to Ini. Ini, please, if you can give your thoughts.
Okay. Our clients and various businesses will always seek different forms of capital, whether it's debt capital or equity capital. In First Bank, we have the expertise to engage our clients and help them navigate that journey, right? And in advising them, we will help them determine what is optimal for them at that time, in the light of the prevailing market conditions. So sometimes it may be more advisable for them to seek debt, and then the bank will step in. Or if we believe the time is opportune, we then will work with our sister company, FBN Quest Merchant Bank and its various subsidiaries to take them to the capital markets. But again, it's a function both of the stage of evolution of the client and its business. Is it ready to go public to raise capital? And also the market environment. Is there an opportunity at this point in time for the market to receive such an offering? But we have the expertise across the group to engage our clients and advise them. We have the toolkit with which to do so as well. So it's a collaborative effort, it's iterative, but more importantly, it's a big function of the market environment, which will ultimately determine whether it is going to be debt-driven or equity-driven. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ini, for that insight. I have a question from the virtual audience, and it caught so many people asking that question around the bank, and we have some of the executives here, and I would like to spare the panelists and give that question to one of First Bank executive. The audience says, is First Bank offering loans to customers? I have an answer, but I would like Seyi Oyefese to address some of our potential customers concerned. Is First Bank offering loans? Please hand over the mic to Seyi.
When I heard that question, I laughed. That's our business. We are offering loans. We've been supporting the Nigerian economy for ages, and we will not stop to support the economy. So I always say to our clients that we have abundance of naira to help you grow and expand. So the answer is plain. We are offering loans. We keep lending. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seyi. Yes, that was actually my answer. That is the core of First Bank's business. We are offering loans. We still continue to offer loans because we're a financial intermediary. Thank you. Any other question from the audience? We can take. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to quickly direct the question to the man to your left. I heard him say something about FBN supporting SMEs, of course, being the fulcrum of any growing economy. Just to be clear or to know more as to how you're able to support them based on the lines you attributed, being able to know when they need a lawyer, how to put the proposals together, know how to scale their business. So, for instance, the furniture man you gave example of, I think what could have been the winner for him was that he had to set up a factory. If he didn't know to set up a factory, that money would just be either lodged in a bank or something, and he would just probably employ more people and not be able to scale up in terms of bottom line and baseline. So what you're doing exactly with the SMEs program and how you're actually helping to help them contribute to the society or to Nigeria. Then the second quick question will be as regards something you also mentioned around the gas development. It's often said that you hear that in a lot of energy forums that most Nigerian banks don't have the backbone to support projects around oil and gas and around gas development, as it were. So when you talked about people not scaling up or not moving up with all of the putting together of trying to develop gas projects and not taking it to the next level, was that a function of financing? Was that a function of funds, or just people not seeing through that aspect of business in Nigeria? Because gas pricing is still an issue, so you don't invest in an area where there's no clarity. Just a quick one there.
Thank you so much for that question. I would like Tosi to first of all, take the gas-related question and give his thoughts around the SME, but I would like Sheyi Oyefeso to actually provide some context and specifics on how we are engaging and supporting SMEs as a bank. Tosi, please.
Thank you. So just to be brief, gas, there are a number of reasons why. So the macro environment itself, gas pricing, so domestic gas pricing clearly is a bit of an issue right now. Funding capacity. So there are all sorts of issues when it comes to putting these projects together, which is why you always need a bank or banking partner that understands exactly what you're trying to do. When you're trying to raise large sums of money and you're speaking to banks and you're speaking to investors, you have to understand exactly what you're doing, what the payback is, and all the variables have to align. And it's not been easy from a geography perspective for us right now. So you've seen a lot more people decide not to go ahead yet. But like I said, it's really only a matter of time. As the economy comes together, as the new government comes through, people begin to build confidence, and then we start to see a lot more investment decisions being taken. But just to summarize, no one reason why some projects don't go ahead. There are a myriad of reasons. The secret is to getting all of those sorted so that you can move forward, and we will see those this year. I'll hand the SME question to Sheyi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Arguably, we are the bank with the largest reach in Nigeria. And looking at the Nigerian landscape, the SMEs are all over the place. And over the years, we have perfected the play in that middle market, the play in dealing with the SMEs. I am certain that there is a product to deal with your needs as an SME, whichever sector you find yourself. So we have that bouquet of products that helps you. And we have that reach. All you need to do is just walk into any of our branches, and I can assure you, you will get attention for your financing need. With all confidence, I can say that in this country today, if you are an SME, we are your best bet. We understand the informal system and the informal structure in that space, and we have perfected the act of dealing with that space. You want attention? Our doors are open. We are your best bet. We'll partner with you. I can assure you that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheyi. Ugodri, I have a question from the virtual audience for you. And the question goes thus. what do you think will be the effect of the yet to be launched Dangote refinery, and that's with respect to even FS availability in Nigeria and stability of some energy issues in Nigeria?
Brilliant question. I think that the Dangote refinery, if it does commence operation in second half of this year, as has been projected, provides a immense opportunity for this country to at least wean itself off FX pressures. First of all, for the government, it means there's less need to fully finance importation of petroleum products, because now you have the refinery that can at least meet most of the demand that we have locally here in Nigeria. But more than that, what I do see, particularly for businesses, particularly small businesses, when you have refineries like this, operating the heart of Lagos, the industrial, the effect it has on the on industries around, the Ekpe Aja axis is immense. There's going to be need for a lot of retail trucking. People are going to need to move products out of Dangote refinery. Government's FX spend. What it just means is
recording in progress.
Sorry, what it just means is that the government fiscal pressures now moves away from financing subsidy to at least financing government expenditure. But
when I think through what the FX market environment will be in 2023, for the reasons I outlined earlier. Again, when you think about it, we look back historically, the issues we've had with foreign exchange liquidity have largely been on account of our policy choices that we have made, right? So I always tell people this: there's more than enough.
Mortgage, the cost of mortgage goes up, mortgage payments become more expensive. And considering the fact that we're dealing with an economy where majority are below the poverty line, this typically means that real estate will be unaffordable for the vast majority, because the bulk of real estate we have is more of the luxury end. You don't have the low cost. Typically, I wouldn't say it wouldn't worsen the situation, because we're already in a very bad situation. But then even if as Doctor had projected that we could see cuts in the MPR in the near term, I don't think even the lowering of the MPR at any point in the year would provide some respite or improve the impact of mortgage payments on the average Nigerian.
Thank you so much, Moshope. And that brings us to the end of the panelist session here. And I thank you, my panelists, both Moshope, who is virtual, and the in-person panelist, Ini Ugojiri Tosi. Thank you for the insights. Please, for our customers, continue to engage us to give you insights on economic matters, on business areas to help you grow your business. Thank you. I will call on Tosin to give the closing remarks while we round off this session. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also learned quite a bit from the session myself. So I think it's January. I'll start by thanking all our clients for the business that we did with you last year. We are clearly prominent with all the clients that we deal with. We are, like Chike said, trusted advisor, which means we spend quite a lot of our time dialoguing, brainstorming with you, working through your planning, and we're doing a lot of that in January as we all expect an exciting year. Whether there'll be ups and downs is actually a given. The question is whether you have a financial partner alongside you that can help you navigate the ups and downs that the year will bring our way. And I think this is where First Bank steps in, and First Bank is present. Of course, loans are important, but even more important is the thought process, is the intellectual capacity of the strategies that you require. We spend all of our time speaking to clients. We understand what everybody is doing, and that insight is invaluable when it comes to positioning your business. So I would implore you to please continue to work with First Bank. If you're not a client at the moment, then clearly you're missing out on something. And I again will implore you to connect such that we can start the journey. I wish everyone a brilliant year and successful year, and we're always around the corner when you need us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tosin. It's almost clearly getting to the end of the session, but the one last item on the agenda is the photo session. So please, would like our customers to join us at the photo session, where we'll just take some of the pictures for our documentation as well as okay. So we'll start with the panelists and the keynote speakers for a photo session.
Using the wrong tools can cause more harm than good. Same applies to business. Ask yourself, what does your business really need? Not sure? Visit www.smeconnect.firstbanknigeria.com to find out and get the best solutions for your business.
You first, First Bank.
Brother Jumbo, why you dey fumble? You no need to dey suffer to send money, oh. Carry phone, make you dial the number 894. Make you know they wait. 894. No need to dey stand for line. 894. It is safe and secure. 894 for me. 894 for you. 894 for there's a number that could change the whole world. 894. It no matter if you don't get data. 894. Just pick your phone and dial the number. 894 for me. 894 for you. 894 for Niger.
Dial *894# to get started.
You first, First Bank.
In 1894, our first branch opened in Lagos, Nigeria. And we took our place in this new land brimming with possibilities and surprises. Take Kano, for instance, where the city's wealthiest trader made his first deposit. 20 bags of silver arriving on camelback. Aren't you glad that we offer online banking today? Expanding across the West African sub-region and beyond, our early presence made it possible for all hardworking Africans to build great things. So is it any wonder that not one, but two First Bankers have gone on to become Nigeria's central banker? We are intricately woven into the fabric of society, supporting Polo for over 100 society, supporting Polo for over one. Are you coming?
You first, First Bank.